Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. Today, we're taking a dive into the period we've somehow not really covered yet. It's the Attitude Era. We've been doing this podcast for months, and I feel like this is the first proper Attitude Era show we've done.
Yeah, we kind of covered like the very beginning of it, like literally the beginning of it, depending on who you ask with the Austin 316 promo. But it's funny that we totally avoided it to this point.
We only do bad shows on this podcast.
Truth. But hey, we got a hell of a one today.
Oh, yeah, this is one of them. It's Unforgiven, 1999. It's the company's very hottest period, but for some reason, to save their life, they could not put on a decent pay-per-view.
This show, it sucks in ways I wasn't expecting it to suck. Like, I knew it was going to be bad. I mean, I looked at the card up and down, and it's just junk from top to bottom, but I didn't expect it to suck in the ways that it did, which we'll get further into.
An intriguing setup. So as I said, this is right at the company's hottest period. I mean, 1999 was not their biggest year on pay-per-view, but it was their biggest year for TV ratings. I think Raw for the year averaged a 6.0, which is insane. There was an episode in May that was on a night Nitro was preempted that did an 8.4. Steve Austin and The Undertaker's title match from the night after King of the Ring, 1999, did a 9.5 quarter hour with something like 12 or 13 million viewers. This is the absolute peak of the boom right here.
That's wild. That's literally triple the rating that your average Raw gets.
Yeah, and like, what's the biggest? I think now maybe the night after WrestleMania will do like 5 million viewers.
And we're talking, what, a double? Like, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and this is really right before they get the first kind of pop of the bubble, because right after this, they switch from USA to TNN, and they never quite get back to the level of rating they were at. I think TNN was available in fewer homes. I think some people, I don't know. I guess there's some people who just kind of lost interest around this time, or couldn't be bothered to find the new channel that the show was on.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the case where there's just a couple of different places where people kind of jumped off of the wrestling train. This was one, the Invasion was another. It was just kind of, or like literally the night after WrestleMania 17, a bunch of people just jumped off the train.
It's just as we covered in our I guess it was our second episode, Backlash 2001.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's literally like it couldn't sustain itself to this degree. So you're going to see like pressure starting to come out the valves, like little by little. People are going to start to leave, and eventually it just settles back down to the 3 rating that wrestling will probably always have.
I'm still hopeful that there's another boom to come, but I don't see it anytime soon.
Agreed.
So, as we said, this was the company basically its hottest. One of the primary people responsible for this was the infamous Vince Russo.
Vince Russo.
Can say a lot of things about him, many of them bad, but I think anybody who tries to take credit away from him for the success the company had in this era is just wrong. Like, he was absolutely one of the architects of this product, of the rise of Steve Austin, of the rise of The Rock, and you got to give the guy credit for it.
Well, let me ask you, because the theory on him has always been that he needs the filter of Vince McMahon to be successful. Now, obviously, we've seen him in WCW and in TNA, and for you lucky people out there who have read the review that we did, Ring of Glory, which is maybe his finest hour. Do you feel like that's the only way that he could have ever been successful? Do you think it was the two Vinces working together that made this work?
I think it's a lot of things. I don't necessarily buy into the filter theory, because a lot of horrible shit made it on the air anyway. So if Vince was filtering, he wasn't doing it all that well. They still put, Beaver Cleavage and the Blonde Bitch Project and the Brawl for All and all that other garbage on the air. I think it's more just a case of Vince Russo only knows how to do one thing. And it just happened to be the perfect thing for this era. That kind of raunchy, Jerry Springer-inspired product was perfect for the late 90s. And everywhere else he's gone, he's tried to recreate this without realizing that times have changed and you need to change with them. It's like he was the offensive coordinator of a great football team that like hit on a new innovation in offense. And then everywhere he went after that as a head coach, he tried to run the same offense, not realizing that everybody had caught up to what he was doing.
That's actually a fantastic analogy for it. I was trying to think of like a real life example, but there's like hundreds of examples of that exact thing.
Every New England Patriots assistant who became a head coach.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And another great analogy to that is when he went to WCW, he tried to be the head coach and didn't have the slightest fucking idea of how to do that.
He also tried to be He also tried to be a player coach because he put the world title on himself.
Oh,
and hey, that sounds familiar because that happened on the way into this pay-per-view.
There we go.
Boom, segue. That's why I'm the host, baby.
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to kick back and let you do your thing here because we got a lot of ground to cover.
All right. So SummerSlam 1999 ended with Mankind shocking the world and winning the WWF Championship in a triple threat match that also involved Steve Austin and Triple H. It had originally been booked as Steve Austin versus Triple H. Mankind was added kind of at the last minute, and I have a few theories for why that happened. Austin was dealing with some health problems, as we'll cover on this show. But the bigger thing is Jesse Ventura was the referee for the match. This was a huge thing. Jesse Ventura had been elected the governor of Minnesota the previous November. Getting him back was a huge coup for the WWF. The show was going to be in Minneapolis. Jesse was going to be huge over as a babyface, making his return to the WWF. The problem is this should have been Triple H's crowning moment. Should be where Triple H wins the title, gets anointed as the new top heel. Problem. Are you really going to have Jesse Ventura raise the heel's hand in victory here? Can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the internet theory of the time was Steve Austin didn't want a job to Triple H, but I think that's bull. Like, Austin loses to Triple H at No Mercy a month after this pay-per-view. So right. I don't think he had any problem getting pinned by Triple H. I think they just made the decision that a face needed to win. They didn't want to have Austin beat Triple H, so they had Mankind win by pinning Austin, just to kind of further show I don't think Austin had any problem losing.
Now, was this the show where they had originally talked about putting Chyna in the main event?
They actually promoted that for a week. Chyna won a number one contenders match against Triple H and Undertaker. And then I think the next week they did her against Triple H, and she beat him again. So for 2 weeks they were promoting Chyna versus Austin. If I'm piecing together what I've heard correctly, I think Russo wanted to do Chyna versus Austin here. And Vince and Austin, I think, said no on that one. But I think it was considered by some people in the company, but I don't think it was ever actually going to happen here.
It would have been interesting if it was just like a four-way or something like that, like just to get her involved, because I
think they should have built. I think it wasn't the time yet, but they should have built to Chyna versus Austin versus Chyna for the fighting for the world title. Could have been
agree.
Huge.
It was. She got one of the biggest pops of the night on this show, so I can't argue that.
She was such a huge star. It gets forgotten because it gets overshadowed by everything else that happened with her after this. She was a huge, huge star.
Gigantic.
It didn't last it only lasted about 6-8 months before they kind of screwed it up. But yeah. So after the triple threat match, Triple H beat the shit out of Austin with a chair. That put Austin out for a couple weeks. This gave him, they needed storyline cover for the fact that he was really struggling with his knees and his neck, and had to be evaluated. They had to figure out what he could do. He ended up, toughing through it, trying to go for another couple months, but ends up having neck surgery in November and ends up missing most of the next year. So the night after SummerSlam on Raw, Triple H defeats Mankind to win the WWF Championship after interference from Shane McMahon. Triple H's big crowning moment, and it's on Raw, not a pay-per-view, but more eyeballs on the screen than it would have had in a pay-per-view, and in the end, didn't hurt him at all. So Triple H, new top heel, seems like he's primed for a nice long title run, but he loses the title 2 weeks later to Vince McMahon, who had been banished from WWF TV forever at Fully Loaded 1999 in July. Yeah.
We're getting into some stuff here that, like, just saying it out loud, it doesn't seem like it can be real.
I mean, they killed Vince off, and he came back to TV a month later. So
True.
Just a end of an era stipulation clearly wasn't going to keep him down.
Oh boy.
I don't really know. I think they took him off TV because like the feud between him and Austin had just run its course and things were getting stale. He'd also had a motorcycle accident that summer and was in a wheelchair. But I don't think he needed, they could have just had him disappear for a few weeks without writing him off forever. But they had to make everything a little extra dramatic in this era. But
right.
So what happened was Linda McMahon, sort of to piss Shane off, forced Triple H to defend the WWF title in a 6-pack challenge at Unforgiven against his opponents, The Rock, Mankind, Kane, The Big Show, and The Undertaker. Triple H was obviously furious about this. He insulted Linda, threatened her. This leads Vince to confront him. And then Triple H challenges Vince to a match for the belt on SmackDown. Triple H kicks the crap out of him for about 10 minutes. Vince bleeds. And then Steve Austin shows up, stuns Triple H. Vince gets the pin and wins the title.
It makes me laugh that it's kind of lost from this period that like Vince McMahon randomly turned face like 2 or 3 times in here and like joined Steve Austin. We all remember when Steve Austin turned heel, but like for some reason we just kept accepting heel Vince being like, nope, he's a good guy now. Why wouldn't he be?
I think that's another of those things that could have been a huge deal if they'd done it better. Like, I've always really loved the storyline they did with The Undertaker in early 99, where, like, he'd gone crazy and come to believe that he actually was The Undertaker, and he's trying to take over the company, and he's threatening Vince's family, and, like, the idea that, like, Vince and Austin have to work together against the mutual threat, like, seems like it could have been a great storyline, but they just bungled it with the greater power thing.
They sure did.
Which is, it's kind of remarkable how many times I'm saying they completely dropped the ball on things, even as they made so much money. But I think objectively they set up a bunch of great storylines that they didn't really deliver on.
Well, it's really similar to what we mentioned last week in WCW. Like, you get to a certain point of success where it doesn't matter what it is that you're actually doing. Like, it can suck, but like you can just coast on the momentum for a while until it starts to matter.
People still buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, people were bought in on the product. Didn't matter when they screwed up.
At least for a while.
So on Raw, Vince comes out. He vacates the title and announces it'll be on the line in that previously scheduled 6-pack challenge at Unforgiven. He also makes a deal with Austin that Austin will agree to waive the stipulation from their match and reinstate Vince if Austin will be the special enforcer for the Unforgiven match, and then he gets a shot at whoever wins the title.
I mean, I guess that sort of makes sense. And it's going to lead up to a very, very strange situation for Austin later in the main event, where you're not really clear on what in the hell his motivations actually are.
Yeah, the whole thing with the we'll go into the referee strike and Austin being the enforcer / color commentator for the main event. But yeah, they were just throwing shit together. I mean, in an ideal world, I guess Austin would have been able to wrestle in the match, but he wasn't up to it at that point.
Right.
His knees and his neck were giving out on him. So Vince decided to abuse his newly found power and fuck with Triple H a little bit. So, on the SmackDown before this pay-per-view, Triple H had to fight for his spot in the six-pack challenge. He had to wrestle all 5 of his opponents from the six-pack challenge in their specialty matches and win a majority of the matches to get his spot in the main event at Unforgiven. I would strongly recommend checking out this episode of SmackDown. It's really awesome. Triple H wrestles 5 times throughout the night. He wrestles The Big Show in a choke slam challenge. He obviously loses that because it's impossible to choke slam The Big Show. He wrestles Mankind in a boiler room brawl and wins after some mysterious interference. More on that in a second. He wrestles Kane in an Inferno match. He wins that one because Mideon and Viscera reveal that they've attacked X-Pac, and Kane tries to leave the ring and accidentally lights himself on fire in the process. Poor clumsy Kane.
Clumsy Kane.
He wrestles The Rock in a Brahma bull rope match, which he wins after interference from the returning British Bulldog. We'll cover that in a second. And he's scheduled to face The Undertaker in a casket match. Undertaker refuses to wrestle because he's The Undertaker and he does whatever the fuck he wants, and Vince suspends him and Undertaker walks out. And that's how they wrote The Undertaker out for what ended up being 8 months because he needed some surgery and some time off to heal. We'll also talk about what was going on with The Undertaker in a second because there was some really weird shit with his character in these couple months here.
Yep.
So anyway, instead of going against The Undertaker in that casket match, he had to wrestle Mideon and Viscera. And he initially got Mideon in the casket, and we thought he had won, but then Shane came out and said, no, you've got to get both Mideon and Viscera in the casket. Obviously, that's impossible, so Triple H ends up losing that match. But he won 3 of the 5 matches with the help of the British Bulldog, and ends up getting into the six-pack challenge. So as I said, Taker was written out because he'd been dealing with injuries for what seemed like 2 years at this point. Like anytime you watch a pay-per-view from this era, he's always limping around, problems with his ankle, his foot, his groin, all kinds of things. So he had to heal. They give him some time off. They put the British Bulldog, who they've just re-signed from WCW, into this match. Seemingly had high hopes for him because they also put him in a feud with The Rock, but he was not. He was a shell of his former self, and even the previous British Bulldog honestly wasn't all that great.
Yeah, I mean, the previous British Bulldog's greatest moments are literally being carried to memorable matches by some of the greatest workers who ever lived. That's not something to put on the resume.
No. And bad fit for the era because he was never a good talker.
He just stuck out like a sore thumb, too. Like, his body's not what it was. He just doesn't look right. He's not big in this era anymore. He didn't have that package that he had that made him an appealing main event prospect early in the 90s.
At least they didn't have him in the shitty dad jeans yet. That look starts in a few weeks.
The fuck?
Like,
Hard Foundation Bulldog is peak dad jeans of all time.
And then they put him with the Mean Street Posse. I don't know if that was a Greenwich, Connecticut, Greenwich, England play or what it was, but his WWF return here is a disaster. And unfortunately, he'd end up passing away not too long after this. He'd suffered a back injury in WCW, gotten hooked on painkillers, and that ended up being the cause of his death. Sad stuff, but it's the kind of stuff we deal with when you do a wrestling podcast about shows from more than a few years ago.
Unfortunately, yeah. Every time I review an older show,
Ooh.
and I had to do like did they go on an incline in their career or a decline?
A lot of them ended up dying, so decline.
Yeah, almost all of the people, if you go back further than 2000, it's like, well, 5 of these guys died.
So, yeah. Other good stuff going on at this time. You had the Rock and Sock Connection forming. They did This Is Your Life a few weeks before this, which I've always thought was overrated, but a lot of people really love, and it did do a great rating. Also, one of my favorite random things, a tag team buried alive match with the Rock and Sock Connection against The Undertaker and Big Show on SmackDown. Really good match. Another kind of one of those crazy Attitude Era things I'd say go check out if you have a little spare time.
Is that the one where Big Show chucks Mankind at the
Yep.
the grave and he like bounces off the
Yeah,
ground?
he throws him from the stage like over into the grave, but like he misses and just like goes skidding off. Yeah, just like splats on the concrete.
Horrible.
Yep. Okay, so we actually got through that recap faster than I thought. I think we've established everything we need to. The title's changed hands a bunch of times. It's vacant. All of the big stars in the company are going to fight for it in one match.
Okay, well, if we were in a class, I would be raising my hand at this point because I didn't follow any of that shit, and I have no idea what's going on.
I mean, I remember I was watching at this point and trying to keep track of what the fuck was... Because, like, I was a kid, and, like, sometimes I'd have to do my homework, and I'd miss SmackDown, or I'd miss, like, an hour of Raw, or I'd have to go to bed and not see the second hour of Raw. God, trying to keep track of this stuff was tough.
This is, like, the only time in all of wrestling where, like, you could actually miss a show and be hopelessly behind.
Oh, you compare now, like, I don't even watch Raw and SmackDown anymore. I just watch the pay-per-views, and I've never missed anything.
Yep, pretty much.
So getting into the show, it's Sunday, September 26th, 1999, from the Charlotte Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sellout crowd of over 15,000 people. Buy rate of 0.85, which is about 329,000. Same buy rate as Breakdown the previous year, which is kind of surprising that the buy rate wasn't up, even though so many more people were watching the TV. But pay-per-view was not their smashing success in this era. It was just the stuff people were tuning in to see on TV, all the crazy angles and the interviews and all that was not really stuff they could replicate on the pay-per-views.
Yeah, and this is one of those shows where, like, if you look at the card, like, why would anyone pay money to see this card? There's not a single match on this card that really feels like it's going to matter, especially since they were just doing singles titles matches on TV for free.
Oh, yeah, and the belts were changing hands every week.
Why are you going to pay to see this weird six-man for no reason?
Yeah. And all those guys have been fighting, like Undertaker and Big Show and Rock and Mankind and Triple H had all been fighting each other on TV, had all wrestled each other on TV in the lead up to this. So, yeah, they were not saving anything for the pay-per-views.
And the rest of this card, like, there's not a single match on this that I would have paid money to see.
So we start the show with a really long video package trying to recap everything I just told you. It took me about 10 minutes, and they only have 3 minutes to do it, so it's a little jumbled.
And the best part about it is, like, they're like, all right, what do we got to cut out to make all of this make sense? The British Bulldog. Let's just cut him all the way out. His face is in it for like one split second.
Easy cut. So then they cut into the outside of the arena where the referees are picketing because they're on strike. I don't remember how this started, and I remember at the time, as I was a fan, being confused on how this had started because I had no idea what led to it.
Not only that, but during the course of the show, they never explain it. Like, JR refers to it after every single match, but he never says they're on strike because blah. He literally just keeps being like, well, I guess they're on strike. And he never makes it clear whether we're supposed to support them being on strike or whether it's bad that they're on strike.
I mean, naturally there's kind of an anti-union tone to the product because we know Vince McMahon's political leanings. But yeah, we also aren't so the referees the scab referees are all portrayed as heels because it's Brooklyn Brawler and Tom Pritchard and Harvey Whippleman. So yeah, I don't know. It feels like just another. It's just more like we need more stuff. We need more stuff. Let's have the referees on strike.
I guess it doesn't. it doesn't really add to anything. And then in the main event, when it eventually pays off, which we'll get to, like, it doesn't make any more sense then.
No, not really. So, opening match, we've got Steve Blackman against Val Venus, a main event anywhere in America. I was thinking Val had already turned heel by this point, but I guess that happens the month after this. I think he has his heel turn and he wrestles Mankind and he gets to wrestle The Rock, and it really doesn't get over or lead anywhere. Why didn't Val Venus become a big star?
I'll always
Checks all the boxes.
I feel like he was just someone who was held back by this gimmick.
Absolutely.
It's not something that you can outgrow. It's not something that he had it within him. Like, some people can just be like a complete left turn and change their character completely. I really don't think that he was that kind of guy. I think that this character was close enough to who he actually was, not as a real person like a porn star, but he couldn't get far enough away from it to be himself.
They tried to do that with him in 2000, where he shaves his head and now he's wearing white tights that look like tighty whitey underwear, but was never able to distance himself from this character. If they had, Val Venus was one of those characters that got over immediately because it was so over the top outrageous. Wouldn't he have been better off in the long run if it had just been a Rick Rude knockoff, ladies' man narcissist character?
And I think they could have evolved it in that direction. Especially in this era, having your character be a porn star isn't a deal breaker for credibility's sake. But they went so far down that road that there was no coming back.
No. And it's a shame because I look at Val Venus and I'm like, he looks amazing. Great build, great body, big guy, great athlete, awesome worker too.
Oh yeah, he was so good that in the early thousands, he was the guy they had all the new guys wrestle to see if they could go.
Yeah, because if you can't have a good match with Val, you can't do it.
Right.
And a good promo too. So a guy who absolutely should have been a main eventer and a world champion, and never had a pay-per-view main event, never had a run at the top.
It's so funny too because when he actually later on would go over to TNA. When the Hulk Hogan show first started.
Yeah.
And they were all right, it's time for his main event run. Lasted 2 weeks.
It was way too late. That was 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, way too late by then. I've always been a fan of Steve Blackman, and I don't think that makes me unique as an internet wrestling fan, because I think everybody loves Steve Blackman, right?
Oh yeah. There was just so much weird fun to him. He's just such a quirky dude in the ring, and there wasn't really anybody like him.
No, he's playing a heel at this point, which to me was Steve Blackman's a babyface.
Oh, as the straight-faced babyface? Oh, yeah. That's his role.
Any better than that. Yeah, he had they were trying to make him really vicious, and he was he'd beaten up Ken Shamrock, and it didn't click. Ends up turning face a couple months after this, and then gets his run in the tag team with Al Snow. Brooklyn Brawler is the scab referee here.
Sure.
Not much to this match. It's decent. I mean, Val was really good and Blackman was, okay. Val wins with the money shot in 6 minutes, and then Blackman beats him up with some karate weapons after the match. I should note this match was set up because Val stole all of Blackman's karate weapons out of his bag and replace them with sex toys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
In fact, speaking of which, has any I believe that if Steve Blackman wanted to hurt you with those 2 sticks that he always used, he could. But has anything ever looked less impressive as a weapon
those
than
those 2 little sticks that look I don't know, the rods that you hang things on in your closet.
Yeah, I mean, he literally looked like he was just a wrestling drummer, and he was I'm going to hit you with my sticks, brother.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think Steve Blackman could easily knock somebody out with a dildo.
Oh, that's the thing. We're in the Attitude Era, man.
Why didn't they have him pull out some dildos and go crazy on Val?
If he had pulled out some dildos and used them like his sticks, I would have lost my mind.
Oh, I feel like that had to get pitched, and Vince must have shot it down.
I can't even get the image out of my head. It's too good. It's too good for this world. Too pure.
So we go backstage to an interview with the Big Show.
Actually, before we do, let me ask you a question. Because at the end of the Blackman-Val Venis match, Blackman just like lays Val Venis out with a kendo stick. And then BB, the large-breasted EMT, comes out to help. But then the head of security, Jim something?
That was really weird.
Double leg takedowns Steve Blackman and runs him off.
Yeah, I don't know who that guy was. This feels like one of those things I feel like I'm going to have to spend like 2 hours tonight Googling to try to figure out like who that was and like what that was supposed to be setting up. Because it's easy to understand how a bunch of things would get dropped here because Russo leaves a couple weeks after this.
Right. It's just
so I don't know if there was some big plan to make the head of security like a top guy or something.
It would actually make sense because when Russo took over the booking of TNA, like the security was like one of the big storylines that he first ran with. But it's just so weird to see some guy who I have no idea who the fuck he is. I've never heard his name in my life. And JR's just like, oh yeah, that's our head of security. What the fuck are you talking about?
And he just owned Steve Blackman.
He owns him immediately.
Yeah. And
he's wearing like Triple H's like leather cap.
Pretty tough for a newsie.
Right?
So they go backstage to interview Big Show, who is completely lost, both in and out of storyline. He's lost in storyline because his mentor, The Undertaker, has deserted him. And he's lost out of storyline because they've completely fucked him over in the previous 6 months since he debuted. To recap, he debuted as a heel as part of the corporation. He was kicked out of the corporation a month later and turned babyface to join the union. Then he turned heel again, and they put him with The Undertaker. And now The Undertaker is gone, and shortly after this, he'll turn babyface to have his infamous feud with the Big Boss Man, with his daddy who died of cancer. And then right after that, they'll turn him heel again. He'll main event WrestleMania, and then he'll turn face again after that. And then, a year after this, he'll turn heel once again. That's in the span of just over a year he'll turn all those times.
I mean, it's generally understood that the Big Show has turned face or heel the most times of any wrestler who ever lived, right?
Oh, yeah. Has to be.
I mean, it's just... After 1 year of booking, he is completely unsalvageable. Like, he'll draw money later in his career, but there's no way after this you could have ever gotten him to, like, the Andre level they wanted him at.
They ruined him. I'll tell you what they needed to do. He needed to come in, be a heel, be undefeated for a year, and then wrestle Steve Austin at WrestleMania 2000. Or because Austin was hurt, have him wrestle The Rock instead.
Honestly, he probably should have just taken the belt like right away and just held it.
Yep.
Like, why wouldn't you do that?
They never would have had the patience to do that. And I think the thing is, I wonder if the fans would have tuned out because they would have been like, boring, we want new champions.
I guess maybe you're right. Like, it was just the wrong era for it. It's just so funny. Like, what if Show, like, even if, like, they keep burying him in WCW, what if he comes over with the Invasion instead? And it's in an era where they actually have some time.
Undertaker would have made him look like shit.
Yeah, you're right. That's not a bad point.
He would have gotten to stalk Sarah instead of DDP.
Oh my God, how great would that have been? The Big Show hiding in the bushes.
Do you know who did the voiceovers for that with the distorted voice?
No.
It was Vince.
No!
These clips are on one of the DVDs. You can find them online. It's amazing.
Sarah.
God damn.
Your body looks so nice tonight.
Oh, man. Okay.
Also, this is kind of a recurring segment on our show, and let me just draw attention to it now. It's, what the fuck were they wearing? Let's just take a look at the Big Show right here. If you could possibly pull it up if you're watching along at home, or find a picture of it on your phone if you're driving, please pull over before you do this, of the Big Show in this segment as he wears a giant, like the 90s-est gold chain imaginable, like halfway to like a dookie rope around his neck. He's wearing one giant hoop earring in the wrong ear. And he's wearing like his big, greasy-looking braided ponytail. And it's just bad, man.
This look
Like,
is horrible. Like,
horrible.
I guess they just wanted to be different from what he did in WCW, but like he should always wear the one strap. All giants should wear one strap.
And he was always just wearing like jeans with no shirt. He had no muscle definition. Like, it's a horrible look for anyone, much less someone who's supposed to be like the most intimidating figure on the roster.
Is this where we can cover like what the fuck had been going on with Undertaker around this time?
Yes, please go right ahead.
Okay. So he had been like gradually becoming more and more human over the previous couple years. And then like all at once after he lost to Austin at Fully Loaded, like he got depressed and just like stopped being the Undertaker. And like suddenly he's just like wearing jeans and like a do-rag and sunglasses and he's a biker. Like people just kind of forget that this happened, but like he became Biker Undertaker like 8 months before he actually debuts the character at Judgment Day 2000 when he comes back. Like all of a sudden he's gone from being satanic cult leader to just like this dude who rides motorcycles.
And I wonder if they were trying to break that in, like, oh, let's make it a gradual change, or if Taker just like, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm just coming to work wearing whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, like he was hurt. Fuck it, he's just gonna show up in his trash pants.
I just love that like the Undertaker was like, I'm a biker now, and Vince had to be like, okay, buddy,
okay, sounds good, pal.
Let's go for it.
Him and Big Show, I thought it was a really cool concept, but some of the worst promo segments of all time. Have you ever seen the one that Jericho interrupted?
No.
Okay, so Taker goes out there, and he starts telling this story about how the previous weekend he called up some Hells Angels and told them that he needed 2 bikes, and he was going to take the Big Show out into Death Valley to, teach him the ropes. And he told them, I need one with only enough gas to get out into the desert, not to come back. So he takes Big Show all the way out into the desert, and his bike runs out of gas. And he goes, what you gonna do now, big man? And Big Show goes, well, I'm gonna wait till you fall asleep, and then I'm gonna stab you in the heart. Taker goes, good idea, but I don't sleep. And he drives off. And he waits for 2 days. And then 2 days later, Big Show comes walking out of the desert with his Harley up on his shoulder and a rattlesnake necktie. This promo goes on for seriously 10 minutes. He's telling this story.
What the fuck?
Yes. And then Chris Jericho comes out. And we'll talk more about what they were doing with Jericho in a minute. Jericho comes out and just shits on them. He's like, that was the most boring promo I've ever seen. Thousands of people are changing the channel right now.
Which was his character, but also, like, you don't say that to the Undertaker.
Shit. Can you imagine being put in that situation where they're like, and you're going to come out and tell Taker his promo was terrible? I'd be like, are they trying to get me killed?
Oh my God. But like, and it doesn't make it any better that the fans objectively know that he's right.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like everybody's like, yeah, that promo was shit. This was terrible. So the other thing they've been doing is like Taker wouldn't, like, him and Big Show with tag champions, but he wouldn't wrestle. Like he would just make Big Show defend the titles by himself and like sit on the table and do really shitty commentary on the matches. At one point, he told Jerry Lawler he was going to stab him in the face.
Awesome.
It was some really weird stuff. And I don't know where it was. I don't think they had any long-term plan for this. I think it was just like, Taker's hurt and like, let's keep him out of the ring. And like, I think they were letting him freelance and do whatever he wanted because they didn't really have any plans for him at this point. It was time for him to step back out of the main event because they had done way too many matches between him and Austin at this point.
Right. I mean, it makes sense, but it's such a mess because we all remember the high parts of like the Undertaker's run during this time. They're some of the most famous segments in wrestling history. They really are. Like there's just some incredible moments. But from week to week, this is some of the most baffling shit that's ever been committed to television. And the fact that like he is every kid's like favorite wrestler of all time, it almost doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, this is like one of the worst eras for him. Like, I mean, this isn't really an era; it's just a couple months, but it's just inexplicable. And then they decide, yeah, more biker. That's what we need. We'll go more in depth on Biker Taker another time, but I really have always considered that kind of the low point of his career.
Yeah. Though I mean, I personally loved it, but that's back when I came to wrestling again. So that I'm kind of biased on that one.
Yeah. Okay, that was a long tangent, but I think it was worth it.
Hell yeah.
Next match for the European title, Mark Henry versus D'Lo Brown. Somehow I wasn't excited to get to this one.
Let me paint you a picture real quick. The video for this literally starts with the words, Webster's Dictionary defines friendship as.
Oh, God. It's like a really shitty high school paper.
This is one of the
worst college essay of all time.
Yes.
So the feud here is that Mark Henry was really fat, and D'Lo tried to get him to lose weight. That's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing.
Because of that, Henry turned on D'Lo and cost him the European title against Jeff Jarrett at SummerSlam. And because they were determined to shit on every title in this era, they had Jeff Jarrett hand Mark Henry the European title as a thank you.
Like, let's just put that into perspective. Everybody literally loses their mind for forever because Eric Bischoff handed Triple H the world title one time. And like that was very egregious. But literally, Jeff Jarrett wins 2 titles and just hands one off like, yeah, whatever.
And also the owner of the company won the world title.
Yeah. Also, this is the second time this exact thing has happened with the European title in its short history.
Yeah. Triple H and Shawn Michaels.
Exactly. It is literally the lackey prize.
Yeah. The European title never went anywhere. I think they had big plans for it originally because when they brought it in, they were touring Europe a lot because it was the only place they were drawing. But it very quickly got forgotten about and just became like the bottom tier title. It became the title they would use to be like, let's do a title change on this show. Let's have somebody win the European title.
Yep.
Mark Henry has recently become sexual chocolate for reasons I don't really remember.
Because it's sexual, baby, and he wants to give it all to you.
A gimmick it took him 10 years to overcome.
And they literally still chanted at him. So, I mean, how far did he
Never really overcame it.
Right.
D'Lo Brown was awesome. This is another guy who feels like should have had a bigger run, but I think he had a couple things go wrong right around this time that cost him. What'd you think of D'Lo?
I thought that he was a great talent with a lot of potential. I never thought that his promos were particularly good, but he really got by without him. He just had a lot of innate charisma.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the draws thing ruined him.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple weeks after this, D'Lo botched a running powerbomb on draws. I think a fan had thrown a drink in the ring, and there was some moisture. He slipped, dropped draws on his head, freak accident. Draws was paralyzed. And it seems like D'Lo never really recovered from it.
And I can't blame him because accidents like that do happen, but some people just genuinely don't recover from them.
Yeah, I mean, you think of how bad you'd feel even in like an actual competitive sport if you hurt somebody like that. And then instead it's a work where you're supposed to be protecting him and like guys are putting their trust in each other. I can understand how that would really cause problems. I think the other thing was Russo was a big D'Lo guy. And so when Russo left, he no longer had his biggest advocate. And I almost wonder if there was some boomerang effect because Russo had been such a big fan of D'Lo that because Russo left under such shitty circumstances, people, just felt like, yeah, let's bury D'Lo to get back at Russo.
I think you're right. But it's just so funny to think that by like the Royal Rumble 2001, which is like a year and a couple months away, he's going to be managed by Tiger Ali Singh with
Slow
Chaz as his
down
tag team
with
partner.
Chaz. We'll get to Chaz in a second.
Oh,
How's
boy.
that for a tease?
Here we go.
Nothing really happens in this match. D'Lo's over, though. He wins in
Huge over.
9 minutes, which is way too long with the lowdown. Mark Henry was really bad. Really, really bad at this point.
It's just he doesn't do anything. Like, he can't really work. He can't really bump. He can't really do anything at all that you would.
Doesn't really have any charisma in the ring.
No, he's just a lump. Like, he's somebody, and you can see why there was a lot of bitterness towards him, because he's somebody that they invested a ton of money in. Who's just
they're paying him like, I don't know the real number, but $500K a year, $700K, like big money.
And like, you're paying that to a guy who is so overweight that they literally make it a storyline on television.
Yeah. Like, he's bottom 5 on the roster at this point, and he's paid a top 10 salary.
Yep.
So D'Lo wins the European title. Who cares? I have no memory of what ended up happening with his title reign because it doesn't matter.
So did he already have the Intercontinental and European titles together?
Yes. Yeah, because actually I don't remember whether he had them both or whether Jarrett. I can't remember if him and Jarrett was champion versus champion. I think he had them both because he won the European. Shane McMahon had retired the European title, and then Shane gave it to Mideon after Mideon found it in Shane's bag.
Nice.
Again, just trying to bury this title. And then D'Lo won it for Mideon on Raw.
I just love the idea that you could just show up and be like, hey, Shane, I found a title. And he'd be like, oh, you're the champ now.
Yeah, you can have it.
Sure, why not?
So then we get an Acolytes promo. They talk about how they ran one ECW team out of the WWF, and they're going to do the same thing to the Dudley Boys. So this was referring to a real incident that happened between the Acolytes and the Public Enemy. I think it was on Heat, but it might have been on Raw. Basically, Public Enemy came into the WWF and did not get along with everybody in the locker room. So after a couple weeks, they put him in a match with the Acolytes, and the Acolytes just fucking tuned him up for real. Have you ever seen this?
I've seen it, yeah, absolutely. And it created some heat that lasted for years and years.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. Maybe not as bad as Saturn and that jobber he fucked up that one time, but still pretty bad. So they're making a storyline out of this real thing. And the funny thing was, at the time with the Public Enemy, the storyline was nobody likes these guys in the locker room. They're not getting along with everybody. That was one of those Jim Ross specials where he would just tell you the truth on air. He was just yeah, these guys don't seem to be getting along with the other boys in the locker room. I don't think they're going to last real long around here.
It's just what? JR, what do you say?
Thanks, JR. But they didn't last real long. So the storyline is that the same thing's going to happen to the Dudleys. And then Chaz walks in. This is the former headbanger Mosh, and the Acolytes beat him up. So at this time, Chaz was involved in a storyline where he had been accused of beating up his girlfriend. Have you ever heard about this?
I've literally never heard of this storyline. And on the show, literally what happens is you see they're in the locker room and then they pan over and you see somebody getting their ass kicked by 20 dudes. And then you don't even see who it is when he's leaving. And then King is just oh, hey, that was Chaz. Wait a minute, why are they kicking Chaz's ass?
Is the most unrealistic part of the storyline the idea that the guys in the WWF locker room would intervene because somebody was beating up their girlfriend?
Exactly. You think that any of the guys involved in that beating were thinking in the back of their heads I wonder if we should beat up the 20 other dudes we know are beating their fucking wives.
Yeah. A little unrealistically SJW for wrestlers in the 90s, I think.
Or even Jerry Lawler being yeah, get out of here, you dirty wife beater. Jerry.
Ooh, boy. Yeah, so don't worry. It turned out it was all a ruse and she was falsely accusing him.
Oh, good. This is such a progressive program.
Yeah. I have no idea I mean, it's just another one of those, like, one of Russo's philosophies was if it happens in real life, it should happen on our show. So it was just one of those, well, like, you know, whatever show was popular at the time would do a storyline about domestic violence. Why can't we?
Sure.
Yeah, I just don't think wrestling works that way.
And honestly, it's worth mentioning that being a misogynistic, like, wife abuser, that's something that follows your character for the rest of the time that it exists. Like, the character of Ant-Man has had an incredible amount of trouble, like, being in any way lovable after an alternate reality, an alternate universe storyline where he was a wife beater from 30 years ago. It still tars and feathers that character for good reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, not just that, but, like, we'll get to Jeff Jarrett in a minute.
Hey, we will, because he's in the next match.
He's literally still suffering from this association, I believe, to this day.
Yep. So next up, it's Jeff Jarrett defending the Intercontinental title against China. Now, amazingly, this is, I think, the first appearance of Jeff Jarrett on this podcast.
Amazingly.
Ooh. So this is the most over he ever was.
For what that's worth.
His character is that he is a crazy misogynist and beats the shit out of women. I just another of those, at the time, I had no idea where this came from. It just started one week.
And, like, when we say that he's a crazy misogynist who beats women, like, there have been a lot of characters like that in wrestling history. Like, we just did the show where Colonel Parker was there, and that was kind of his whole character, too. During the course of the show, Jeff Jarrett manages to lay his hands on every woman on the roster. Like, he was not at war with China particularly. He was literally in a feud with every woman under the roof.
A one-man He-Man woman hater club.
He was literally beating every woman he could beat.
Yeah. He enjoyed it. He embraced it. I don't know if they ever had him hit Deborah, though, because I don't think they wanted to make it like a domestic violence type of storyline.
Oh, yeah. You know, WWE would never put up with anyone hitting Deborah.
Yeah. But we're just savage tonight.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
So this match, I think this should, if I remember this, I think this feud just started because Jarrett was a misogynist and China was a woman. So China's like, I'm going to beat you and take your title. JR awkwardly says, it would be incredibly humiliating for Jarrett to lose to China. And King decides to fuck with him and be like, well, you're being really sexist there, JR.
And it's actually fantastic because for like a full 5 minutes, Jerry the King Lawler becomes feminist ally Jerry Lawler.
He's like,
you're being chauvinistic there, JR. Why couldn't a woman win? What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's awkward because, like, Jim Ross is not trying to be sexist here. He's just a traditionalist, and I think probably did not approve of the idea of men wrestling women. Like, he not into that. And if we put ourselves in the mindset of, a male professional wrestler, like, hell yeah, it's going to be embarrassing to get beat by a woman.
And, I mean, you don't have to go all the way Ahmed Johnson with it in order to take it to the furthest extreme. But especially during this era, I can kind of see that argument. But the point, and they were trying to really get across China as being an incredible performer in her own right, kind of separate from being a woman. But that's really more of a reflection of how they viewed women as in general in this era, as like, well, we have to separate China from being a woman so that we can actually push her. Like, that's so fucked up.
Yeah. So the other weird thing going on with China was she was still Triple H's manager at this point.
Comes out to his music and uses his finisher.
Like, and it would continue for a few more weeks and then they would break it off. But it's just one of those, like, they just treated storytelling differently at this point. Because to them, to them at this point, and I think I like this style. They're like, well, just because, China is a good guy now doesn't mean she has to dislike Triple H now. They can still be friends even though one's a good guy and one's a bad guy. And I kind of dig that, but it's a little weird with her in this particular case.
And it's also like, as nice as that would be, that's not something they were ever consistent about enough that you would expect that was the reality.
No, I mean, in this particular era, they did a decent job with it, with like, Shane and Test, and there were some other examples. But yeah, it's a weird dynamic that she's still, a heel manager while she's a babyface wrestler, and it was probably good that they dropped it not long after this. So China won this title match by beating Billy Gunn a few weeks before this. At SummerSlam, Billy Gunn wrestled The Rock in the sub-main event, and then he lost to China 2 weeks later, signaling the end of his push. We'll cover that in a minute. Jarrett jumps China before the match, so she punches him in the dick. Jarrett gets into it with Mae Young and Moolah in the front row, and China hits him with a chair. China goes for the pedigree on the announce table, but Jarrett reverses it and catapults her into scab referee Harvey Whippleman, who was knocked out. Jarrett sizes up China for a guitar shot, but Mae and Moolah get in the ring, and they beat up Jarrett, and they suplex him. Kudos to Jeff Jarrett here, because he did all the work on that suplex.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, he literally jumps.
Yeah. Jeff Jarrett was a great athlete. Still is.
It's kind of funny, too, because while I absolutely abhor the character that he's playing, and I absolutely abhor the thinking and booking by WWE that put everyone in this match in the position to be part of this atrocity, I can't really fault Jeff Jarrett, the performer, for being so willing to sell for women when almost nobody else on the roster seemed to be willing to.
No, Steve Austin wouldn't wrestle Mark Miro because he got powerbombed by Sable.
And we all know the famous Ahmed Johnson line, which I'm sure they all
What
parodied.
was that?
I believe when literally he was asked to not even do a job for China, but just sell for her, said, "I ain't gonna sell for no bitch," in his typical Ahmed Johnson way.
Oh, man. So what happens next? Deborah comes out and hits Jarrett with a chair, and China pins him. 1, 2, 3, huge pop. China's the Intercontinental Champion. But the decision gets overturned. Other scab referee, Tom Pritchard, tells Whippleman what happened, and Jarrett keeps the title. He would, of course, lose the title the next month to China at No Mercy in the Good Housekeeping match in his final WWF match ever. Are we comfortable saying ever at this point? I think he's on the blacklist forever.
It's for certain ever. I mean, him being the founding person of TNA and like the cult of personality that it revolves around, I think you can certainly say probably ever. But what is it that you think makes him, like, Vince has burned a lot of bridges with a lot of people and then just let him come back. Why is Jeff Jarrett the one that he will never, ever cross?
Because he's not worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's no money in it.
It's one thing when it's the Ultimate Warrior who's fucked you, or Hulk Hogan, or those guys are all good. Like, those guys can all make Vince money. As Vince McMahon once said to Mick Foley, Steve Austin makes me money. You just make me want to puke. That's how he feels about Jeff Jarrett.
Let the record show that the most savage burial that Vince McMahon ever committed in his 40-year career in the business was when he was cutting his promo on who he was going to bring over from WCW, and he was like, Jeff Jarrett? Nope.
How do we spell that?
Nope, not Jeff Jarrett.
I think we spell that FIRRED. Fired.
Savage. And he found out he was fired from that promo.
Oh, man. Don't fuck with Vince McMahon.
Holy shit.
I thought that was a pretty good match, actually.
I mean, China, and this is another reason why maybe her star couldn't grow higher than it did, was she was not a very good in-ring performer. She just couldn't do very much. She was very limited.
She's been wrestling. Her first TV match was like fall of '98.
Right. And it's not like now where it's like anybody with any sort of potential, no matter what they are, would have just been given like 1,000 house show matches to prepare them.
Yeah.
She just really wasn't getting that. So, I mean, I don't know how she was supposed to get better.
Program. And so she can just she can work out with guys before the before the shows, but yeah, just they didn't have the same infrastructure at this point.
Yeah, so she's super stiff, and most things don't look good. But honestly, like Jarrett does a lot to help, and it's not a bad match, and the crowd is so into it.
Yeah, yeah. So next up, we've got the Acolytes and the Dudley Boys. Weird early Dudley Boys here, where they're just doing their ECW act.
Now, the Dudley Boys, when Bubba Fight first started in ECW, he did the stuttering thing, right?
Yeah.
And then like years went by, and he and Devon became like the most nuclear heat getting promo givers in the history of Northeast wrestling. And then like they bring them in, and like for some reason they're just like, hey, yeah, go back to that thing you did at first with the stutter. Let's do that.
Yeah. I don't know. No good explanation.
Why is Vince obsessed with stuttering gimmicks?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Same thing they fucked Matt Morgan over with.
At least with Matt Morgan, I guess the stated idea was that, like, you're perfect in every possible way, but you got one flaw.
Yeah, Bubba has more than one flaw.
Yeah, Bubba's got a lot of flaws.
He's wearing a Confederate flag bandana here. Another sign of the times. Yeah. Not much to this match, which I think was an endorsement of the Dudleys that, Farouk and Bradshaw didn't give him any shit here.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting time for the Acolytes, too, because they're kind of into their APA characters already, but they still have, like, the whole veneer of, like, Acolyte gimmick that doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah, they've still got, like, the symbols on their chest and, like... Yeah. I mean, they continued to be called the Acolytes for a long time.
Yeah. They're not actually acolytes of anything. They're just literally Ron Simmons and John Bradshaw being like, I'm going to whoop his ass.
Which is all anybody wants.
That's all anybody ever wanted.
Yeah. Like, I could watch... It's a shame they didn't have, like, job matches at this point, because I could have watched these guys stiff jobbers all day.
Oh, my God. It never gets old.
They had some matches with the Hardys in this time that were just brutal.
And they were like... It's so funny that, like, their whole gimmick on the show was the stiff guys, because they were the only people who were really working stiff at the time, so they could get away with it. And it was just awesome.
Who won here? Dudley's win after Stevie Richards runs out dressed as one of the Acolytes. He hits Devon with the Acolytes win. I got this backwards. Stevie hit Devon with a kendo stick, and Farouk got the pin. Nothing came. Stevie Richards ended up needing neck surgery and going away for a while until he came back to do the right to censor thing. So nothing comes of this.
Yeah. Two quick things. One, the Acolyte-like symbols that they had on their chest, Stevie said UPN on it, which is pretty good. And secondly, did his neck surgery have anything to do with the fact that after he helps the Acolytes win, Ron Simmons picks him up and, like, gives him his Dominator, like, on his head?
I'm sure it didn't help.
Yeah, like, literally it was like, ugh, God, horrible.
Next up, we've got a hardcore match for the Women's Championship between Ivory and Luna. I have no idea what the storyline was here. This match literally starts in the back because Ivory attacks Luna, just like jumps her in the hallway. They fight for 3 minutes and Ivory gets the pin. Nothing to this.
And it was clear that the finish was supposed to be like Ivory stuffs Luna in a trash can and then pins her, but like she couldn't get her shoulders to be down because trash cans are round, guys. Your shoulders can't be down in a trash can.
Can't kayfabe physics.
And literally Harvey Whippleman's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to count it. No.
Goddamn scab referee.
I know.
Just indicative of the women's division at this point. I've heard Ivory is actually a good wrestler, but I never really saw it. I don't know if she just never had the opportunity to show it in the WWF.
I think largely that reputation comes from her being the only actual credible wrestler from Glow. And then she came in, and I mean, she wasn't horrible, but like, when would she really get the opportunity to show it?
Yeah, because by the time the women's division actually got going, she was basically retired.
Though it must be said that Chyna's burial of her at WrestleMania 17 is one of the most egregious offenses against women's wrestling this century.
Epic. Um, Lillian Garcia interviews Mae Young and Moolah. Ivory storms in and insults them. So, was Ivory a heel before this? Did you get any feel for that?
Because I got the impression that Ivory was a babyface because
Me
Luna
too,
was
'cause Luna's
always
a
a
heel.
heel.
Yeah.
But it certainly didn't seem that way during anything on this show.
Yeah. So this is our new women's feud. Moolah won the title next month at No Mercy. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Next up, New Age Outlaws defending the tag titles against Edge and Christian. Billy Gunn was supposed to be in the main event, and now he's back in the tag team.
Let's just have
spectacular failure on this push.
Let's have a moment of silence for the failed dreams of Billy Gunn.
Oh God, The Rock fucking buried him in those promos.
But he had to, because it just wasn't gonna happen, and he knew it.
And this is the thing about The Rock. Like, The Rock is not somebody who brings people up to his level. If you're not on his level, he's just gonna wreck you.
Yeah. And like that's kind of how you can tell if you are able to go. It's like he's the promo version of like Val Venus in that way. Like, we're gonna put you in with The Rock. If you can go, yeah, you'll go. Like The Miz made a name for himself because he could go with The Rock. There you go.
So they broke the Outlaws up really prematurely at the beginning of the year because they had just can't just keep a tag team together. So they randomly gave them both singles runs, Road Dogg in the hardcore division, Billy Gunn in the Intercontinental division. Then they decided we're going to push Billy Gunn. He turns heel. He wins the King of the Ring. He gets to wrestle The Rock at SummerSlam. It completely bombs out, and now they're back together.
It must have seemed like such a good idea to push Billy Gunn. Like, oh, he's got the body. He can go. He's so athletic. Why not push him? Like,
can't talk.
What would have happened if they had given Road Dogg that opportunity?
Road Dogg can't wrestle, and he was addicted to drugs at this time. But Road Dogg can talk, and that's more important.
Yeah, I honestly think that he would have at least gone further,
Yeah, because, he would have... The Road Dogg is capable of holding his own with anybody on the mic, especially if he's motivated and trying and not just falling back on his shtick like he tended to.
Right.
So the tag belts have changed hands a lot in the run-up to this. Undertaker and Big Show won them from X-Pac and Kane at SummerSlam. Then they lost them to the Rock and Sock Connection on Raw. Taker and Big Show won them back on the SmackDown in the Buried Alive match. Rock and Sock won the belts back in a Dark Side Rules match where they were facing all of the members of the Ministry of Darkness. So I think they pinned like Mideon or Viscera to win the tag belts there. And then Rock and Sock lost the belts to the newly reformed New Age Outlaws on SmackDown. And Edge and Christian are getting a title shot here for some reason. I don't remember why.
How far into Edge and Christian are we here? Like, obviously they're not in the Brood anymore.
Christian debuted like a year before this in the fall. Edge debuted in the summer of '98. And they were feuding at first, but then they did the Brood. But now they're out of the Brood, and the Hardy Boys are in the new Brood with Gangrel. That didn't last long, if you can believe that.
Right, but this is before the tag team ladder match that kind of made their careers, right?
That's the next month. That's at No Mercy.
Got it.
So real referee Jimmy Corderas has crossed the picket line, and he's in charge here. Not well explained. Not at all.
No, they're just like, dirty Jimmy Corderas crossing the picket line.
Scab.
Is he a heel or a face? Come on. Like, is it good to be in the Union or not?
I mean, the Union of people you ought to respect, son. Or up yours, for short. Or faces.
I mean, we're not even there yet. I can't even be indignant about this yet. We got to wait until later.
It wasn't really clear to me in this match. I think this was a face versus face match. I think Edge and Christian were faces at this point.
I mean, it certainly seemed that way, and like the ending would give you that impression. But like I think the Outlaws kind of work heel in this match.
I mean, no, but the hot tag was to Billy.
That's true. Like, it's not really clear, and I don't really know that they bothered to like lay it out that way.
Yeah. So Road Dogg gets worked over. Billy takes a hot tag. Christian hits him with the Unprettier, but the Hardy Boys interfere. That allows Billy Gunn to hit the Fameasser to retain. This was okay. It was fine.
Yeah. I mean, that's all it really was. Like, you would look at this now and just be like, holy shit, that's a pretty hot match. But these two teams were not
Edge and
hot
Christian
at the
were pretty
same time.
bland. Like, Edge and Christian were not cool until they turned heel. They were really bland as faces.
Yeah. Like, nobody in the tag, these two teams are tagged from the tag division in completely different eras. They cross over a little bit here, but like, there's no cool Outlaws versus Edge and Christian match.
Yeah. Lillian Garcia interviews the British Bulldog. He denies that he's working with Triple H. Nothing came of this.
Nope.
And next up, we've got the match they all came to hear about. It's the Kennel from Hell, Big Boss Man. How have we not even mentioned this to this point? It's Big Boss Man against Al Snow in the Kennel from Hell match. But what's there really to say?
I mean, let's go into this with the assumption that there are people listening to this who don't know what happened in the Kennel from Hell match, because I just want to believe that,
and I don't know what happened.
I just want to believe so strongly that somebody out there is going to learn about this match from us. You know?
Yeah, maybe. I would. I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a pretty hardcore wrestling fan and know about this. But I'll hold out the dream that, like, there's some 10-year-old listening to this.
Little Johnny, we're going to run you through a magical night.
So, the storyline. Big Boss Man was a really troublesome fellow in 1999, really acting out.
Was there ever any kayfabe reason for why he was just randomly ruining people's lives and murdering their loved ones?
He's just evil. He just is. He's bad police.
He's like the truest heel that ever existed is Boss Man in 99.
Yeah. Which makes it more inexplicable that they tried to have him be a face against Undertaker at WrestleMania.
I mean, how do you become a face? How can you come back from murdering someone's dog and making them eat it, and then like trying to steal the fucking dead body of the person you're feuding with? How do you come back from that?
Yeah, so this storyline, Al Snow had a little dog called Pepper. I think Pepper was sort of the replacement for Head because they had pulled the Al Snow dolls out of Walmart because people thought that Head was like a woman's severed head, not a mannequin head.
So instead they were going to have him have a little dog.
Yeah, which Big Boss Man kidnapped, killed, and fed to Al Snow. Like, told him we're going to do a hostage exchange. Al Snow gets to the hotel room. Big Boss Man's like, here, I cooked you some food. Go ahead, have some. I don't know why Al Snow fell for this, why he thought the Big Boss Man was being hospitable to him, but he ate Pepper.
This is a truly great moment in the history of stupid-ass baby faces, because literally the Boss Man is just like, hey, I know we hate each other and we've been feuding for months, but I made you some steak. Pepper steak. And Al Snow's like, yum, all right, hand it over.
I don't even think like 1993 Sting would have fallen for that one.
I just want you guys at home, try to put this into context. Like, try to imagine today that like Naomi and Natalya are feuding, so Naomi's just like, hey, I killed your cat and made a tennis racket out of it. It's like, no, why?
So the way the Kennel from Hell match works, there's like an old school barred steel cage surrounding the ring, and then there's a Hell in a Cell, surrounding ringside. And on the floor there are wild, starving Rottweilers. Except all the Rottweilers do is piss and shit and fuck.
This is one of those ideas that comes from like doing too much cocaine at 2 a.m, and you're like, dude, Hell in a Cell is the greatest, but cage matches are even better. What if we put them both in there and then ravenous dogs?
They're starving. They're gonna tear them apart.
It's just like
where do you get vicious Rottweilers? Where do you go for that?
Rottweilers are us. I don't know. I can't. Here's the other thing. Like, in order to put this together, nobody had to consider genuinely how this was going to look when they were actually doing it. Like, maybe in their head they were like, there'll be a bunch of dogs. But did it occur to anybody that their handlers would have to be in there too? So there's just a bunch of people milling about who have nothing to do with the match. Did it occur to them that
I'm sure they were just thinking to themselves, like, we're going to let the dogs loose on the floor, but you can't do that.
No, you can't do that. And it's cruelty to animals if you don't have their handlers there. Like, you're not going to get away with it.
Yeah, this was not. The answer is they didn't think this through at all.
And I really feel like they took this match to Snow and Bossman and were like, here, Vince Russo came up with this idea. We don't know what the shit you're going to do with it. Just come up with something. Because they don't give.
It's one of those where Russo's thing where he's like, I don't get involved with the actual wrestling, completely screws the guys over.
And they get like 20 minutes for this.
Oh, this goes on, and it's just dead. Like, this was actually a reasonably hot storyline. Their previous 2 pay-per-view matches had been good and gotten over, but oh boy.
Al Snow tries so hard. Like, my heart goes out to him because he's come up with a couple of spots that he thinks are going to work. He thinks that it's going to be great. Like, he's just like, all right, here, I'm going to be hanging from the cell. Just like Michaels in 96. I'm going to be hanging from the cell, and then I'm going to fall, and I'm going to have to run away from the dogs before they get me. And I'll jump up onto the cell and hang there while they try to get me. And he drops off the cell onto the ground, and the dogs don't even look at him. So he's like running for his life from nothing.
Yeah, just everybody knows this match is terrible, but if anything, it's worse than its reputation.
The best part about this match, bar none, is that about 1 minute into it, Jerry Lawler just decides he's going to bury it for the next 20 minutes.
Team player.
He literally is just like, they'll be trying to like focus on what's going on in the ring, and Lawler will just be like, hey, that dog's taking a piss. He's pissing all over the ground. Don't slip in the urine.
Oh, God. Anything else to say about this one?
I can't explain to you how bad of a match that this truly is. Like, not only does the match die a death immediately, not only do the announcers spend the whole thing burying it, including JR, who just gives up about 5 minutes in. Not only do the dogs actively hump and piss and shit rather than participate in the match, not only does the match concept not make any sense, not only is it a bad match, it is like the longest 20 minutes of your life. It goes and it doesn't go anywhere, and nobody does anything. And then eventually Al Snow just scampers out and he wins, and it's like, okay, great. I'll never forget this match and what it made me. I'm a different man now.
Yeah, Al Snow turned heel right after this.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, like suddenly we're booing the guy who got fed his dog.
He ate the dog. He knew.
Yeah, the dog's spirit took over and broke him bad.
Oh my God.
Makes as much sense as anything else on this show.
Sure.
Next match, Chris Jericho versus X-Pac. So, everybody knows Chris Jericho had one of the greatest debuts in wrestling history. And it went to shit right after that. He just immediately got heat on himself in the locker room. And it didn't help that the character they gave him was that he would come out and shit on whatever was going on the show.
It's kind of funny because that was sort of what he did in WCW too. So they probably just thought that it was just like an extension of that. But WWE was such a different universe. And for him to come out and literally just say every minute, like, this show sucks. I'm interrupting a segment that sucks. You suck. It's just such a horrible way to debut someone, and it buried him.
Oh, you're absolutely setting him up for failure with this. Like, he was already going to get kind of a frosty reception coming in because him and Show were like the first 2 big WCW guys to come over. But they just make it so much worse with this.
Oh boy.
And then, so they don't book him in a match at SummerSlam. Like, Billy Gunn is wrestling The Rock, and Chris Jericho doesn't have a match. Then they put him in a feud with Ken Shamrock, which gets dropped because Shamrock got a huge offer from Pride and didn't renew his contract and left the company. So then they just throw this thing together with X-Pac. And I think the logic was X-Pac is the best worker on the roster. Jericho's been struggling with the WWF style. Let's put him with X-Pac and see if they can have a decent match.
And I think famously Jericho mentions in one of his books that like X-Pac came back after this match and was like, dude doesn't have it. And they they were thinking about cutting their losses with him at this point.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, imagine just understand how close he was to none of the things that happened in the 2000s happening and how different the wrestling world would be if that had gone down.
Yeah. Jericho also has Mr. Hughes as his bodyguard here.
Horrible.
No particular reason. Like, just random oil and water.
I mean, they desperately wanted Mr. Hughes to be with somebody. Like, they saw, like, bodyguard money in him. And he's just awful. And he doesn't fit with Jericho. Like, no manager ever really fit with Jericho. But they were obsessed with giving him one. Mr.
Hughes managed so many people, and it feels like it never got over.
I mean, he was just sort of eternally searching. Like, it's so funny because I kind of feel like that exact character has been done right so many times by more talented people. Bad Luck Fale is literally that character right now.
Yeah. So I didn't hate this match, but something didn't click here.
It just wasn't great. And especially, like, this is sort of like internet dream match territory, especially at the time. Like, there probably were some expectations coming into this, and it's just kind of okay.
Yeah. Did we get the first X-Pac sucks chance here?
It definitely did start here, which is funny because he was, like, the pop when he came out was, like, top 5 pop on the show.
Oh, he was so over it. Like, he'd been doing the tag team with Kane, which people were super into. Like, he was borderline main event at this point.
And yeah, so I guess this is the beginnings of what would eventually become the X-Pac heat, air quotes implied. I guess. I've never been really clear on why. It just sort of randomly came out of nowhere.
Well, like, a few months after this, he gets in a storyline where he beats up Tori a bunch and then, like, rapes her into loving him.
Oh, well, yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, like that makes sense.
I mean, and that's another example of what we said earlier. Like, that character never washes off, ever.
Yeah. So, yeah, this match, pretty weak finish. Kind of a just lame DQ to end it. And then Road Dogg makes the save because him and X-Pac are buddies, and he's got an issue with Jericho. I don't know why Jericho couldn't just go over here. X-Pac's not a character that needs to be protected.
I would have to imagine it was still because they weren't sure that they wanted to have him winning any matches at the time.
Yeah. He turned it around pretty quickly. You know, within a month or two, he's the Intercontinental Champion, and his star's on the rise. But it's just interesting how it seems like it came real close to them just, like, pulling the plug right away.
And honestly, Vince gives him a lot more chances and leeway than he gave a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people have come in, done a lot better, and been dropped unceremoniously.
Yeah. All right. We made it all the way to this main event. It's the six-pack challenge for the WWF title. It's Triple H versus The Rock versus The Big Show versus Mankind versus Kane versus the British Bulldog. Just throw all the big stars into one match. Austin is the last guy to come out. He's the special guest enforcer for the match, but he spends the entire match doing commentary.
And he's pretty good at commentary, actually.
He is.
Yeah, he puts all the right stuff. He's kind of like throwing to sponsors and stuff like that. Like, he's doing good.
Steve Austin's really good at this whole wrestling thing.
Yeah, go figure.
I thought this was a good match. I really like this.
I don't know that I really liked it. It tried to protect everybody without making anybody do too much. But honestly, like, I can't think of a single thing that like half of these guys did in the entire match. And the crowd really only responded to Triple H versus The Rock, which is the same thing that would happen at WrestleMania the following year. But like, they put all these people in here. The crowd only cares about Triple H versus The Rock.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at it, Big Show has no momentum. We've covered that. Kane was doing pretty well at this point, but I don't think he was perceived as world champion at this point. He's kind of been bounced out of the main event all year and been in the mid card. Bulldog's just come back. He's got no spark. Mankind was just the world champion, but also doing really goofy stuff that wasn't very main event-ish.
And we had just seen Mankind versus The Rock like 50 times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the crowd was ready for Triple H versus The Rock, and they really won't get it for real until Backlash the following year.
Yeah. Well, they had just had a big feud over the summer, though. They had a strap match at Fully Loaded. They had a cage match.
That is true.
But, yeah, I mean, Triple H has leveled up even since then. So it's really fast-paced. Crowd is hot. Everybody gets to do their stuff. The striking referees show up and they beat up scab referee Jimmy Corderas in a funny moment.
It's just so weird. The referees do a run-in on this match and beat up the referee in this match. It has nothing to do with this match.
No, but it's just continuing this striking referee storyline that is never followed up on.
And here's the thing. All throughout the match, Steve Austin is making comments about like, Jimmy Corderas is doing a pretty good job, whatever. And then when the referees start to jump Jim Corderas, Steve Austin runs in to the aid of scab referee Jim Corderas, beats up all of the union referees, and sends them running. Like, what the fuck? Whose side are we on?
It's just an excuse to have Steve Austin beat people up.
I mean, it was hilarious to watch basically an entire run-in comprised of ref bumps.
Yeah. You would think that they would all just like run into each other and be knocked out for 10 minutes.
I did love that every time Steve Austin punched one, he would like fling himself into the guardrail like in full ref bump mode, just like, I'm going to take the biggest bump of my life. Boom!
Yeah. So Triple H pedigrees Rock. Austin gets into the ring and reluctantly counts the 3 for Triple H because he guaranteed Vince there would be a new champion tonight. But I don't think he had to actually count the 3 there. It wasn't like Austin has to referee the match impartially or he doesn't get his title shot.
Yeah, I think
that's how they're redoing the SummerSlam 97 finish, but without any of the stakes from that.
Right. Like the idea as I got it was Austin wanted to fight Triple H. So this was his way of getting his sort of real rematch with Triple H specifically.
That makes sense. It's the same thing he did with Owen Hart when he helped him win the Intercontinental title so he could beat him.
Yeah. He's just an extraordinarily petty man, is Steve Austin.
And to prove it, he drops Triple H with a stunner after the match and drinks some beer.
There you go. Classic. Austin's got a pose, brother.
Yeah. So fallout from this, Austin and Triple H would have a match the next month at No Mercy. Triple H would win after botched interference from The Rock and an accidental sledgehammer shot to Austin. That would set up Rock versus Austin versus Triple H at Survivor Series, but that match wouldn't happen. Austin's neck got too bad, so they had to pull him out, and they replaced him with The Big Show and put the world title on him, but we'll find some reason to cover that another time.
The Big Show's title reign. Maybe the most forgotten title reign in the history of wrestling.
Deservedly. Triple H and Rock would take over from there, and the company wouldn't miss a beat. Russo left for WCW a few weeks after this. That is a well-documented disaster. He was sent home, and the company went out of business. He would briefly return to work for the WWF for literally a week in 2002 before quitting. That has always been, to me, one of the most fascinating stories in wrestling history.
Well, I mean, they basically forced him to quit because wasn't it like literally almost everyone in the writing team threatened to quit if they didn't get rid of him?
Yeah, and it went from you're back and you're the head writer to you're going to work from home and send us ideas.
And thank goodness they got rid of him, or we would never have gotten Ring of Glory. Please look for the DVD on Amazon.com. Ring of Glory. You will not be disappointed.
Are we going to have to review that on one of these at some point?
Dude, Ring of Glory features a main event where there's a sword suspended above the ring.
Is it the sword of the devil?
It's the sword of Jesus.
Oh. Jesus the baby face?
Jesus the baby face.
That's weird.
A janitor shows up and is revealed to be Jesus.
Oh, that makes sense.
Dude, there's so much. It was amazing.
Ooh. So, wrapping up Unforgiven 99, what's your take on this one? I thought it was not great.
It was not a good show. Like, honestly, like I was kind of excited when I saw the names on it. I was like, ooh, Outlaws versus Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys, and there's some stuff on here. Honestly, as I watched it, like, nothing really draws the eye. It really feels like they're just biding their time to get back to TV. Like, it's like, well, we got to put all the titles on the line because that's what you do on pay-per-views, but none of these are the real title matches, and none of them really matter. Nothing on this show felt like it made any difference whatsoever.
Yeah, the thing is, I spent so much time talking about what was going on TV in the lead up to this. The TV was way more entertaining than the pay-per-view was.
Oh my God, yes. Your description of what was going on TV was more entertaining than the pay-per-view.
Yeah, we've got the formation of the Rock and Sock. We've got buried alive matches. We've got Vince winning the title. And on the pay-per-view, there's no way to top all that.
No.
The bell has to ring and people have to work matches, and they just don't have the roster or the product to put on good matches at this point.
And truthfully, like, I'm an old wrestling fan, and I just don't have the patience for an entire 3-hour show with not one decent fucking match on it. There's like not one truly redeeming thing on this whole show.
I liked the main event.
It was okay, but like it's not good enough to make up for the rest of this.
No, it wasn't.
I had to watch Kennel from Hell, man.
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking of watching this show, don't just go back and watch like some of the stuff I talked about instead.
Yes, and then watch Kennel from Hell because there should be a club with all of us in it who got to experience the glory of the kennel.
Yeah. Well, so I think that wraps us for Unforgiven 99. Next week, because we didn't suffer through enough Russo garbage on this show, we're going to review the very first NWTNA weekly pay-per-view.
Oh, you guys know TNA is my wheelhouse, and I am unbelievably excited to talk about this show. We're talking about Jeff Jarrett in his truest, most concentrated form. We're talking about the most disrespect ever shown towards the NWA Hall of Fame members. We're talking about the sad old corpses of Scott Hall and Ken Shamrock. Oh, it's going to be good.
Oh, that sounds like some pretty shitty shit.
It will be a great excuse to talk about the missed potential of Ken Shamrock, too, because really, that's going to be a big part of that story.
That was one tangent we somehow didn't get off on this show.
But yeah, oh my God, it's so good. Like, it's so... Jeff Jarrett embarks on a feud with a country music singer on this show. Literally, it's a thing that happens.
Wait, you mean he feuds with himself? Because Jeff Jarrett is a huge country star.
Somehow that doesn't make it into being part of the feud, and I'm stunned.
With My Baby Tonight went triple platinum.
It should have. It might still.
Ooh, so that's what you got to look forward to next week. NWTNA pay-per-view number 1. A wild, terrible experiment that's somehow still with us 15 years later.
Oh my God. You actually mentioned something incredibly poignant to me while we were recording the WCW show, that we are as far away from this show, the first TNA show, as it was from WrestleMania 3.
Holy shit, we are so old.
Let that sink in and all the way until next week when we watch it.
Ooh. All right. We made it through Unforgiven 99. It was wild and crazy, but we got through it. Anything to add before we sign off?
Nope. Like we said, I do not recommend watching this show, but I damn sure recommend going back and watching this entire year worth of television. You will not be disappointed.
It is the craziest stuff that's ever happened. Everybody was loving it. It's fun to go back and relive.
Hell yeah.
Whew. All right. Well, thanks for listening to everybody. Tune in next week for some top quality NWA TNA from The Asylum.